consumption councils in the planning process. So it would be the city federation that decides, are we going to ask for a new hospital for the city? It would be a borough that would ask, are we going to ask for a new clinic? Just like the neighborhood has to decide, you know. And would the neighborhood councils have to send representatives to the borough, you know, federation to discuss, do we really want a new clinic or something else, or we don't need a new clinic? Yes, they would. Now, the other thing you asked about is sort of differences between sort of worker self-managed market socialist. Because in good models of worker self-managed market socialism, there's also a workers' council, and it's also one worker, one vote. So what's different about those proposals than this proposal? Because that's what's similar.
Yeah.
And there are two real huge differences. One is because I don't think there's anybody who has been proposing models of sort of market socialism that have proposed you really have to seriously do something about balancing jobs. Most visions of a market socialist economy are still visions where the sort of way that jobs are aggregated and the way that jobs are done inside the workplace, you know, it's not that different from the way things are now. So there is a major difference. There's a major difference between taking this seriously and sort of saying this is a big part of what we're doing or we're not doing. If you go historically and look at Yugoslavia, the workplace didn't look any different in Yugoslavia. I mean, the jobs were pretty much the same kinds of jobs. There were managerial jobs, there were floor sleeping jobs, you know, there was somebody that was running a machine all day. There was no real attempt to change the traditional divisions of labor. Now, you have to decide, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? So that's one big difference. And the other difference is anybody that tells you that there's no labor market in a market socialist economy is either making a trivial point or lying to you and themselves. Now here's the trivial point. I can say, well, there's no labor market in a market socialist economy because there's no employers and therefore no employees. When somebody is hired in to work into a worker self-managed firm, they're not hired in as an employee, they're hired in as a member of the workers' council. And that's true. If you don't have employers and employees, then in that sense you could say there's not a labor market for employees. But there is a market for members. And that's what's going to really count. So is there a market for members, and will the laws of supply and demand determine the wage rates that these members come to have? And I know David Schweikert really well, and we sometimes debate back and forth, and sometimes we don't. I don't debate him as much as Michael Albert does. But what David says is, well, there's no labor market in my model because the workers are free to set whatever wage rates they want. Well, then there's no labor market in capitalism either. Capitalist employers are free to set whatever wage rates they want. But don't you all realize that the laws of supply and demand in labor markets basically have a lot to do with what it is that people's wages turn out to be in capitalism? Well, guess what? The laws of supply and demand are going to have a lot to do with what the wages turn out to be in David Schweikert's model of market socialism, too. And why is that? It's because what is negotiated, and this is important too, in a participatory economy, are people free to apply to work wherever they want to? Yes. In a participatory economy, is a workers' council. I mean, the workers' council has an approved plan. That includes you're approved to have so many workers of this kind and that kind. Given what you already have, that might mean that you need to hire in some extra of these kinds. Is the council allowed to choose to hire whoever they want from the applicants that come in? Absolutely yes. And that's true in market socialism also. So you say, well, wait a minute, this looks like a labor market. I mean, it feels like a labor market to me. I can apply to work any place I want. It feels a labor market to the the workers' councils, they can hire from the list of applicants whoever they want. So why isn't it a market? Well, in market socialism, the wage rate is determined as part of the hiring decision. What would happen if the going wage rate, you know, for plumbers was $10 an hour, and we said in our worker, and somebody said in David Schweiker's Workers' Self-Managed Market Socialism, some enterprise said, well, we want to hire plumbers in, but we don't think it's fair to pay plumbers more than $5 an hour. They wouldn't be able to hire any plumbers. That's why that market wage rate and the laws of supply and demand is basically going to determine what they have to pay if they're going to hire in a plumber. Now, how is it that the sort of terms of remuneration or pay are worked out in a participatory economy? Well, you can't guarantee somebody what they're going to be paid or not going to be paid when you hire them in, because it's only afterwards, when the committee has sat down and sort of looked at efforts, that anybody knows what they're going to get. So the wage rate is not determined at the time of the hiring. It's determined afterwards according to a decision amongst the employees about if anybody's worked harder or anybody has worked less hard. But in a market socialist model, that wage rate gets determined at the time of the hiring, and it's just self-deceptive or deceiving people to pretend that, you know, the laws of supply and demand for this kind of labor versus that kind of labor aren't going to basically set whatever it is the wages turn out to be. Now, I mean, I'll help you out here. If you think that free market wage rates are fair wage rates, then you should have no problem with that. On the other hand, if you think that the wage rates that come from the laws of supply and demand in labor markets basically are part of the problem. If we have to pay people that way, it's going to be impossible to basically pay people fairly. Then you should have a problem with that, and you should realize that that is part of what you're buying when you're buying a model of market socialism.
You and Tom and you, and any further questions later?
I'll try and make my answers shorter too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and one question here. I try to remember all of you.
Yeah, I was wondering if there is a task that no one would like to do. If there is an activity that no one wants to pick out the trash. No work. No work. Sell or what's it called? Wants to pick out the trash for a city. Or what do you do that you know? If you don't incentivize with wages or otherwise, you
so
know, we have the anonymity.
We've got tasks in a workplace that, at least on average, pretty much nobody would like to do. They're going to get divided up so that instead of essentially having one person doing nothing but taking out trash, we're going to have that task is going to be a part of a whole bunch of different people's job complex. It's going to be, you're going to be taking out trash from time to time. And why is that? Because the balancing committee is going to say, well, we got things that nobody wants to do, we got other things that everybody wants to do, and we're going to basically divide those up in a way that's not, some people do only the things everybody likes, and some people do only the things nobody likes.
What I'm thinking about is more, okay, you have people picking out trash from a workplace to where you, but someone has to care for recycling or whatever. That has to be some kind of job as well, right? For example, for our city, we have people working as trash men,
yes,
picking up the trash. And
yes.
No one wants to do that. There is no work cell that wants to do that. There is no one. How do you make people do that?
Okay, here's what I think your question comes down to, and it's a good one. If you balance jobs for desirability in one workplace, that average, the average, you picked the good example. If the workplace is trash collecting, then no matter how you divide it amongst the different people in that workplace, their job is going to be, on average, less desirable than the job of a college professor. Of course, now college professors,